Welcome all to the Amateur Guide Shogi, and welcome back to some more recaps. This time around, we've got the Eiou title match between our favourite friends, Sota Fujii and Masayuki Toyoshima, who have just been playing in the Eiou title match recap, which I just did. So this is obviously a different title, and I believe that the roles are reversed this time. So last time, Sota Fujii was the defending Eiou title holder. This time, I believe it's Toyoshima who is the defending title holder. And I say I believe because this title match actually is very new. I think it's only been a title match since 2017. I don't know if it was created in 2017 or if it just got upgraded to a title match standard in 2017. But regardless, it's very new. And as such, English resources on it are few and far between. So all of the other title matches have Wikipedia pages, for example, listing past winners. This one does not. So I'm pretty sure that Toyoshima is the defending Eiou in this title match, but I'm not 100% sure. So if you do know for sure, then please let me know in the comments. But I couldn't find any confirming information. It's also only 4 hours on the clock each, instead of 8 hours, so shorter than the Eiou title match. And it is, I believe, still best of 7 or first to 4 wins, if memory serves correctly. In this game, Sota Fujii playing black, and Masayuki Toyoshima is playing white. And yeah, let's just get into it. Actually, no, before I start, Eiou translates to one of two things, either Imperial King or Intelligent King, because the kanji for A can mean either Imperial or Intelligent. I don't actually know which one it's supposed to be, but I've gone with Intelligent because I think it's funnier. Anyway, let's get started. Now, if you've seen the Eiou title match, you'll know that these two very rarely deviate from their standard opening, and we get, as per usual, a wanton loss, white wanton loss bishop exchange, and just a lot of the same standard stuff, developing moves, lifting the silvers, pawn exchange, and side pawn is picked up by Sota Fujii here. Now, Toyoshima dropped when he dropped this bishop, it was obviously kicking the rook out instead of dropping a pawn to kick the rook out, for example. But at the same time, is exerting pressure on this side of the board. This silver is pinned to this lance, and that, as we've seen in a few other games on my channel, has caused some problems in the past. It can be very annoying, and you'll actually see that Toyoshima immediately throws a spanner in the works with this pawn drop. So he lifts this pawn up, and so that he has the ability to drop a pawn in this file, because when this pawn is taken, he's allowed to drop another pawn in the file, and immediately throws it down here, threatening to take this knight. And you can't take it with the silver because you would simply lose the silver and allow a horse to promote right next to your king, which would not be great. So Sota Fujii has to do something about that. And the only way to really deal with it is to simply snip off the bishop, and the rook obviously has to be recaptured, and now you can simply just take the pawn. However, Toyoshima brings his rook in, completing this pawn exchange on this file, and Fujii simply lifts up a gold, defending this square from a pawn drop, instead of immediately trying to kick the rook back. He would probably be incentivized to take this. And now we see a few more pretty simple developing moves, getting the knights involved, getting the silvers involved. And then we see a couple of dangling pawn drops, ready to promote on their next move. They're in different ranks in terms of, this is sort of 3rd rank from the bottom, and this is 4th rank from the bottom. And they're sort of opposite in terms of their properties. And what I mean by that is, this one cannot be taken at the moment. But when it promotes, it can be taken for free. This one can be taken at the moment, but when it promotes, it cannot be taken. And in fact, when it promotes, it would be a fork of these two pieces, which means that clearly this is the more dangerous pawn, and you've got to deal with it. And I say it can be taken because it physically can be taken, but it actually can't be taken because after this rook-bishop trade, Toyoshima has a rook in his hand, and so if you simply took the pawn, that would allow this rook drop, which would be a 3-way fork And yes, you could just simply bring the silver back and give the rook a kick, and these two defend each other. But yeah, you could just take the lance and promote, and that's already pretty dangerous and better for white. So technically the pawn can be taken, but it actually can't be taken. So you've got to deal with it somehow. Sota Fujii instead throws in an in-between move, kicking the rook away, and Toyoshima decides to bring it back to this square instead of back to its home square. And to be honest, I am not 100% sure why. The home square seems better because it's got more lateral movement, and this square, it doesn't seem to be doing anything. It's defending this pawn, but I mean, is this pawn in any danger? And as you will see, actually, this positioning of the rook actually ends up becoming a problem straight away, and also later on in the game, which you'll get to see. But straight away, Fujii pounces with a defensive move. He throws the bishop down to defend against this pawn promotion, obviously. But the other sort of use of this bishop is that it is actually X-raying the rook, which was placed on this odd square. If you just move this pawn, you could start attacking with the pawn and gain a tempo by having this discovered attack against the rook. So yeah, positioning of the rook maybe a little bit weird there. Maybe not. I don't know. I don't know what was going on in the inner workings of Masayuki Toyoshima's mind. But anyway, he instead starts to push this pawn, attacking the king's head, and at the same time sort of maybe thinking about blocking in this bishop's attack. If there's two pawns in the way, then that's less of a problem for Toyoshima than if there was one. Sota Fujii simply just drops a pawn, bolstering his castle and preventing this rook from having its eyes on the silver. And this pawn exchange occurs, and Toyoshima lifts up the silver, attacking these two weak pawns. Okay. However, at this point, Sota Fujii seizes the initiative, attacking the gold with this Tokin, and then dropping another pawn. Toyoshima moves it back. Now, could you have taken this pawn? I actually tried to figure it out myself. I couldn't. And I ended up plugging it into the computer. Yes, you can. You can take the pawn. The computer basically says that both this and this are like roughly equal. But I think the reason why Toyoshima just chose not to take the pawn is that simply, if the gold is here, it's not contributing to anything. Like, a gold here is not contributing to the attack anytime soon, and it's also not contributing to the defense anytime soon. So I think, the reason he probably moved it back is because it is closer to the king, and it's still providing a defensive role, whereas if it was up two squares, that's actually a big deal, because you can't go diagonally backwards with a gold. So it would have to go like 1, 2, 3, 4 squares to get back into a sort of defensive position, which obviously is just simply too much time in Shogi. So he instead just moves it back. But this allows this bishop drop. And as you would have maybe noticed, you could have dropped the bishop here as well in this position without dropping the pawn, which is also good, a fork of these two pieces. But I suspect Fujii just wanted this pawn here to be established, because as a Tokin, it actually causes a bunch of problems, which you'll see momentarily. So Toyoshima, instead of defending this pawn, simply drops his own pawn and starts his own attack. And then we see the march of the Tokins. This gold is sacked. The knight is sacked. This happens. It has to be immediately taken, otherwise that is a three-way fork. You can't deal with that. But that also allows a second three-way fork by Toyoshima with this rook that he had in his hand, hitting this bishop, the Tokin, and this bishop. And here's a little pop quiz for you. Which piece do you save? You can try and figure it out. Pause the video if you need. It's got to be this one. This bishop is not doing a whole lot. It's really not worth as much as this strong bishop here, which is, aiming at the king's head, which is, being very dangerous. And the Tokin, it's very nice, but it's only a pawn at the end of the day. So, if you lose it, no big deal. Obviously, Toyoshima does not take the Tokin. He takes the free bishop, which allows Sota Fujii to escape the Tokin, ready to sort of maybe give some checks. In this position, Toyoshima is forced to defend. Why? Well, this isn't a mate. It's not a threat mate. But it is very, very, very bad if you do not play this move. It's almost forced. if you do something random, like just moving this lance up for no reason, this gold drop is devastating. This is plus 45 for black, according to the computer. So not a threat mate. Well, it is a threat mate, because if you do nothing, then that's mate, or this is mate, whatever you want. But it's not a forced mate, but it is plus 45, which is very, 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 very bad. So you have to defend here. But Sota Fujii simply snips a knight for his troubles and gets ready to recapture the gold with this token after the horse is taken. And as you can see, Sota Fujii he's still got the initiative. Why? Because this is a threat mate. Very easy one. 0 initiatives to mate. You just drop the gold in the head. So Toyoshima has to respond to that. And he runs his king away, but then Sota Fujii responds with a great knight drop with this knight that he picked up just over here just a moment ago. And this is so great because, well, yeah, it's contributing to the attack, but most importantly, it's cutting off both of the king's escaping squares. And what's more, this is a threat mate. Why? Because he's got 2 golds in hand. So if you do nothing, like moving this lance or something, you get check, and it doesn't matter where you move the king. Let's just say back 1 square, you just get, not that, gold on the head. And it doesn't matter where you go, you just still get gold on the head in any of these 3 squares, or even Tokin. Doesn't really matter. So yeah, threat mate. So he has to do something about that. So he drops his own knight to defend this drop here, and defend both of these squares. The knight's having a little bit of a Mexican standoff here. But Sota Fujii has another great use for his golds, which is snipping a rook. So remember when I said ages ago that putting this rook here was going to have sort of, immediate consequences of this attack, this bishop attack, X-ray attack, and also consequences later on in the game? Yeah, so this is where it rears its ugly head. This rook is not trapped, but it may as well be, because, well, it can't move here because it would be taken here. So here is taken, here and here and here. Gold has got it. Here it's technically safe, but it's also not doing anything. And also, as you will see momentarily, it's not going to be safe for very long in these 2 squares. And yes, you could come back here. However, that is actually already plus 15 to 20 if you bring the rook back here, simply because you're cutting off the king's running escape route in this direction, and the Tokin is dangerously cutting off the king's escape route in this direction, and the knight has still got these 2. So it's pretty dangerous to be doing that with the rook. So instead, Toyoshima puts it here. But of course, this allows this gold drop, using his other gold, to completely trap the rook. The rook has got no squares. And so even though Toyoshima has actually got all 4 major pieces at this point, he is on the run. Although this sack of a rook is not completely bad, because, yes, he loses the rook. However, the rook wasn't doing a whole lot, and it forced Sota Fujii to drop both of his golds to get the rook, which is obviously less dangerous for Toyoshima, because 2 golds in hand is obviously very, very dangerous, but 2 golds this far away from the king is far less dangerous. So even though he's losing a rook, this forcing of the golds to be used is actually very useful for him. So obviously the rook is trapped, so you can't move it. So instead he goes for this Tokin, because it's very dangerous, cutting the king off from this direction, and simply captures the Tokin. But this rook is immediately used, X-raying this entire rank, and the king runs to the back rank. Now in this position, you would be forgiven for thinking that this is a mate. I mean, it sort of looks like one. Let's be real. Knight coming in, gold coming in, rook coming in, but it's actually not, because this dragon is doing a very good job of defending. Still, Sota Fujii gives a check and advances his gold 1 step, but this is still not a mate. The dragon's defense is too strong, and since this wasn't a checking move, that means that Masayuki Toyoshima can seize the initiative. So he drops a pawn here, trying to drag the gold away from the defense of this square so that he can drop a bishop there. King runs, and the silver starts to come in, sort of surrounding the king from all sides. And at the moment, it's looking a little bit dangerous for this king, but this gold's defense and this gold's defense and even this silver's defense are still pretty strong. And obviously this king is definitely not in a mate, and this was not a checking move. So Sota Fujii, once again, goes on the attack. As I said before, this dragon's defense is, very strong, so Sota Fujii is like, let's just kick it out. And you might be thinking, well, why don't you just take the knight here? Yeah, you lose the silver for the knight, but you really don't want to move this dragon. And the reason is that this is actually not good. It's plus 23, I believe, in this position for black. And in fact, if you do, it's actually a threat mate if you do nothing. Say you just do something silly like moving this lance or something. Then it is actually a mate. I won't show it right now because if I show you the mating moves, then you'll be able to see the actual moves that were played in the game, and I'll keep that a secret for now. So I'll show you that at the end. So yeah, this is not a losing move, not a mate, you're not in a force mate already, but after the recapture, you are in a threat mate, and it's otherwise still very bad. So instead, he simply moves the dragon back, allowing this trade. However, this allows this rook drop, backed up by the knight, which is still standing, and the capture of this silver. Now, is this a mate? That is the eternal question. Toyoshima clearly thought not, although, to be fair, he was on basically bullet time at this point. But alas, he was wrong. It is. After this one square gap dragon check, Masayuki Toyoshima resigned the game because this is a force mate. As soon as this silver was taken, he needed a silver in hand. But once he had a silver in hand, this was a mate. And it actually kind of seems shocking that it is because, yeah, it looks really bad, with a one square gap dragon and the silver in hand. But Masayuki Toyoshima has actually got quite a few defending pieces here. And when I was just looking at it, I was like, this seems like it should be a really simple mate, but it's actually like a mate in 8 or 10 or something. So it's certainly not super simple. I will show it to you, though. First, I'll show you the other one. So if you captured this silver and the recapture, if you then do something silly, like just moving the lance for one square for no reason, then it's a mate starting from the silver drop. King moves, silver promotes, dragon promotes, king runs, another rook drop because you've got the rook now. King runs, pawn drop, backed up by this knight. King has to run to the corner and mate with the dragon on the behind. So that is a mate. And this mate over here, this was the final move of the game. But if you were to block, you would run into this sequence of checks, utilizing the pawn. So the other piece that he had in his hand. And yeah, this is simply a mate by dragon on the head or gold on the head. You have a choice of two. So yes, that is a mate, and that means that Sota Fujii won the first game of the Eiou title match, bringing the score to 1-0 for the, I think, challenger. Do let me know if that is not correct. But I suspect that it is correct because when... actually, no, I won't spoil anything. But anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this recap, and I hope you all continue to watch my recaps of the Eiou title match. And hopefully, after I finish this, I can move on to some other non-Masayuki Toyoshima and Sota Fujii games because they're fantastic players, but too much of a good thing, I guess. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.